Welcome to Success at Scale, the podcast that covers business stories from experienced entrepreneurs, business leaders, and startup founders on how to translate business ideas into business results. I'm your host, Gregg Stein, and today we're going to talk to one of my favorite guys, Rick Williams, founder and managing director of Williams Advisory Partners. He is the author of Create Your Future for Your Company and for Yourself. He's just an awesome guy. We're going to have some fun today. So Rick, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Tell us about you.
Oh my gosh, Greg, I'm going to be in big trouble trying to keep up with you on this. Okay, so I am, as I say, Rick Williams. I'm headquartered here in the Boston area. Most of the work I actually do these days is helping companies be more successful, serving in their board of directors, and in some cases, helping them with some, we'll call it quasi-consulting advisory work. I am a big-time sailor, which some might say, why is that relevant to any of this? But it's been a big training ground for me in my leadership skills and understanding of how people actually work with each other. And Greg, I know, as you said, I'm going to take advantage of this great opportunity you're giving me and plug my new book, Create the Future. So it's Create the Future for Your Company Yourself, about how to be more creative about where you take your company.
Oh, Rick, I mean, there's so much we have to talk about today. This is going to be so much fun. So, all right.
Keep us on public territory here.
We'll try. All right. It's not going to be easy, but in all seriousness, so you've been, I mean, when I first met you, you were really talking about boards and your involvement and leadership of boards. And I'd love to just hear your perspective on what it takes to be a leader on a board and what it means and all of that. And then I'd love to find a way to tie that back to sailing, because that just sounds like a cool connection there.
Well, we'll come back to sailing, but I will say it's been a lifelong joy of mine and also a terrific experience for learning how to actually lead high purpose, high discipline team. But we'll come back to that.
All right.
So I hosted and moderated a program last week, maybe it was the week before last, for the New Venture Summit on why young companies should even have a board of directors, much less companies that are trying to grow to scale. So let me give you kind of my 30-second pitch for why a board of directors is actually a value accelerator for companies of any size. Fundamentally, the CEO and maybe a founder or maybe a hired CEO, it doesn't really make any difference. The CEO, the senior leadership team, is fundamentally responsible for running the company. They're responsible for creating the vision, day-to-day operations. But those folks, men, women, wherever they've ever done this before, even if they're deeply experienced in doing this, they need people standing behind them or standing with them, not really behind them, but standing with them, who can help set expectations for the company, in some cases be effectively a coach and advisor to them. The board of directors also is responsible for the shareholders, responsible as a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders of the company. And fundamentally, that's what the board is supposed to be doing. In other words, making sure that the shareholders are getting the right information, all that sort of stuff. If it's a public company, that any public reports are done right, the board is responsible for all that. But when you come back to the operations of the company, every single one of us, if we're in that CEO or president leadership position, we're going to do better if we have people who are saying, okay, Greg, what is your plan for this company over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? You articulate it. What are you actually going to try to do? What's the vision for this company? And if you're executing on that plan, what are the expectations we should have about your performance? 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? And somebody that's actually going to say, well, okay, did you actually do that or not? I'll also say one other thing, and that is that the leadership role is a really tough job. And often the people in these positions, they really don't have somebody who they can talk to on a confidential, open basis. It's a lonely job in many ways. And having a board that you can be completely open and transparent with that says, look, I'm not really sure exactly how to approach this. I'm trying to decide between this and that. What do you think? And get that kind of help and guidance. In the end, the leader has to make the decision, and the leader will be responsible for the consequences of those decisions. But having a board of directors, a board of advisors, we can talk about what a board of advisors and a board of directors is different, but having that available and engaged with you as the leader will make you more successful as the leader, and also will make your company more successful. Anyway,
let me ask you this though, right? There's a lot of, so what you're saying sounds like it is the way it should be, right? But far too often it's not that way.
Right.
I think. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're right. It isn't for many different reasons. So in some respects, a lot of people, in fact, I would say even most small and mid-sized companies don't really have engaged boards.
Yeah.
The owner in many cases, the owner may control the company, and they say, if I have to deal with a board, they're not going to know as much as I do about this company. How are they going to help me? It's a pain in the butt if I have to come and explain what I'm doing to this board, and what are they really going to do that's any value to me? Why don't I get my buddy who I go and play golf with on Saturday to come? He'll be on my board. Now maybe I'll get the attorney that gives me, and maybe the banker that gives me some advice every now and then. That'll be my board. That's really all I need. An awful lot of people are like that. You get particularly company founders, but also others who say, I just don't want to be bothered with it. I know much more about what's going on here than anybody else is going to know. And I don't want to be bothered with dealing with some people who are just going to be nitpicking at me and ask me questions that they don't really know enough to even ask the right questions. It's an awful lot of that attitude. And I will say that if you put a board together that isn't the right board, it can be a nuisance and more of a bother than it's worth. So part of it is you have to put some time into, okay, what are you really trying to get out of this board? And, who are the best people to be on it? And people, sometimes people aren't willing to make that investment in getting the right people involved.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's like anything else in business, right? You got to have the right people in the room, and you've got to have the right skill set, and you have to have the right level of, I think there's a big word in boards, myself, which I think you alluded to earlier, which is like trust, right? Like
Right.
You have to have that kind of trust. Oh, I'm going to come to this person to get, advice, and I'm going to trust that I'm going to get, the right feedback in the right direction. And, a lot of times though, I don't know. It seems like that doesn't exist in boards. There's far too often in the small to mid-sized companies, there's like this dysfunctional team in there, right? So
Right.
I guess, someone like you overcome that somehow. What advice would you give to a board that might be dysfunctional right now?
Well, you're right. Trust is essential. So it has to be a two-way street. The board has to trust that they're getting the real story from the leadership of the company. And the leadership of the company has to trust that they're getting the best advice that they can get from the board members. And frankly, the trust is something you have to earn. So you have to take the risk. If I'm the CEO, I have to take the risk of saying, look, my board, 5 people, if that's what it is, or 7 people, or 3 people, I'm going to open the kimono in a way here and say, here's some issues that we're going to be dealing with that are going to be hard for us. I'm just making this up as an example. We have a vice president of engineering that's just not performing. And that person, may, for whatever reason is not performing. And they've been really essential in getting this company to where it is. What should I do about that? Do I try to keep them involved? Do I, let them go? How am I going to find somebody else? You have to take the risk of opening yourself to the board. And the board in the same respects has to take a little bit of personal risk. So often the difficulty with being a board member and the difficulty with the functioning of a board is that the board doesn't work together every day. It's people that really don't know each other very well. I mean, they know except somewhat, but they come together hopefully more than once a quarter, but let's say even once a month. And they have a very limited time in which they've got to make really important decisions. And so often the dynamics of getting that group to actually collaborate with each other is difficult. If you put a good board together, they're not all going to be people who are all members of the same country club. In fact, you don't want that. You want people who are different from each other. You want people who have different experiences. And so it's hard to get that group of people, all very talented, energetic, verbally communicative people, to say, okay, here's a problem. What do you guys think we should do about this? So that's the dynamic on the board side. So, okay, I, the CEO, open myself to this group of 5 people that are all quite different from each other and different from me, and say, what should I do? And they're going to look at this from different perspectives. So the board members, in some respects, they're professional peers, I would say, in a big scope of things. They don't want to look, uninformed or foolish to their peers, other board members. So how do they have enough trust with each other to say, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm not really sure exactly what to do about this, but here's what I experienced when I tried this in another company, and share their experiences with it. So that is the trust building that's going on both sides of the table that has to happen. And over time, if you're persistent at it, keep trying, and you say, okay, I hear you. I've learned something from listening to you talk about it. Even if I don't exactly take your advice, I've learned something and I respect what you said. That's how you build trust with each other.
So, all right, let's change gears a little bit. So you've got this new book coming out, right? You're a board guy, right? Like, what it takes to run a successful business. How do you go from there to saying, hey, I'm going to write a book? What's it like writing a book, and what's the book all about?
Well, Greg, that I've been for number of years, writing twice a month, once a month, something like that, newsletter on sort of how to be more successful running your, I want to say company. It could be any organization, nonprofit, division of a larger company, even a government agency. And several years ago, this is actually pre-COVID, people were saying, well, Rick, why don't you take the articles you've already written? Many of these have been published nationally, internationally, sort of paste them all together and you'll have a book. Everybody says you ought to have a book. Well, anyway, I thought about it, and yeah, maybe someday I'll do that. But I thought about, what do I really have to say that would be actually helpful to people who are the leaders, particularly of medium-sized and smaller companies? And I went back to my experience as a management consultant with a large international consulting firm, Arthur D. Little. And I consulted with, usually firms like this are mostly working with large companies, and large in the US, outside the US. And I said, I really think that the approach, the tools, the way of thinking about how you do this, that consulting firms and people like myself were bringing to larger companies are also valuable to medium-sized and smaller company leadership. So what I decided I would do is write a book kind of outlining in the step-by-step process how you go from identifying what the threat or opportunity that's facing you all the way through the process of deciding for yourself what success would look like. What are the options you have for responding to that challenge? What are the barriers to execution? And then how do you choose which way you actually want to go? And so that's what the book is about. It's the process, team exercises that you and your leadership team, in principle, you can do it by yourself, but you and leadership team can go through to address major challenges for you. As we're speaking, it's not published yet, but I'm hoping it will be published shortly. And then it will be I hope it'll be a valuable guide to people like yourself and the leaders of other companies that are striving to grow, or even if you're already successful and you're declining, how do you reverse that? It's not just growth, it's whatever the challenge is that you as an organization are facing, and how do you actually address that step by step, exercise by exercise, and bring you to the end of choosing the future for your company and to some extent for yourself.
I love it, Rick. I can't wait to check out the book. I really can't. And I'm curious, we talked about sailing earlier. We said we come back to it. Let's do it. So talk about, charting the future as it pertains to sailing.
Well, okay. So there's sort of two different stories I will relate to this. One is that I've been a sailor based in Marblehead, Massachusetts, I don't know, 25 years, a long time, maybe longer than any of us want to really admit. And so the last number of years, the boat, my sailboat, which is called Chariad, Chariad. Chariad has its own website, actually. You can go to it.
Oh, wow.
So we have been very successful year after year. We've won virtually every regional regatta and championship. We don't run every one of them every year, but we've won consistently many of them over the years. So the deal is that if you're doing a sailboat race, you have to, before the race starts, you have to think about what's the strategy. How are we going to compete against these boats from the beginning to the end of the race? We're competing against the winds, the currents, the other boats. And then once you get underway, you're dealing with the tactics. Okay, how do we compete against this boat right next to us? What do we do? And so you're both having to have a strategy at the beginning, and you deal with the tactics during the race. What do we do right now against this boat? We're coming up with a windward mark and a change sails, all that sort of stuff. And so it forces you to in effect have a business plan, preparing to start the race, a strategy for sailing the race against your competitors and against the wind, and then the tactics all the way through the race to be competitive. So we are typically will have 8 or 10 people on the boat. This is not a smaller boat. So you're having to get 10 volunteers, including myself, to show up on a Saturday or Sunday morning and work together as a team. These are not people who are getting paid to work. We have to work collaboratively as a team. We have to practice. We have to say, okay, who's best at doing this job and that job? And it has been so helpful to me over the years to, in my mind, and I'm like many people, I say, I really know how to do that. I could just go and pull that line, set that chute, whatever it is myself. I can't do that as the leader. I have to work with the team that's on the boat, help them collaborate as a team. And these boats are big enough, so you can't even talk from one end of the boat to the other. If I could be yelling, go do something, people at the other end of the boat can't even hear what I'm saying. So you have to have the team that really knows how to collaborate and work together as a team. Incredibly valuable to me as lessons to me that I've learned over the years as the leader of that kind of a highly competitive and successful team. And I talk about that a little bit in this book, as the lessons learned that I've learned as a leader. In many respects, it's like being like a platoon leader or a captain in the army of how do you get people, and you don't get people, how do you earn the respect and set the direction for your working unit to actually succeed in what it's trying to do. That's sailing story number one. Sailing story number two is we've obviously had COVID over the last 2 years. And like everything else, the sailboat racing was shut down. And people,
It's terrible.
none of us really knew what in the heck we were supposed to be doing.
Right.
And what we eventually, so this is 2020, I'll get my years right here. So this is the first year of COVID lockdowns. A bunch of us got together and said, remember, we're all kind of afraid. We're all not sure what we should or shouldn't be doing. We're afraid of each other as people. We're being told we can't go to restaurants and we can't do this and can't do that. Well, a bunch of us said, we're also told that being outdoors is where you want to be. Getting exercise is where you want to be. So we said, among our team, let's just get on the boat and go sailing. Got the boat in the water and we went sailing. And a bunch of other boats said similar things. They said, let's just get out and we'll go sailing. And then, and all the yacht clubs and the sponsors of the racing had said, we're not going to do this. We can't be doing anything official. So skippers then said, well, why don't we just say ourselves, we'll get 10 or 15 boats together and we'll say, we're going to go do our own race. Very informal. And we did that. And that was 2020. And what it did for that year, and this is the sort of beginning of the summer through the fall, is it gave a whole bunch of people purpose for themselves. It gave us a purpose for how we were spending our time. It gave us a connection with our teammates that we wouldn't have had if we had just stayed home and said, well, gee, I can't do anything. I'm just going to stay at home or just go for a walk on the beach by myself. And these are people that did it because they wanted to do it personally. They wanted to be part of a team that was trying to do something meaningful. And it gave us definition in our own lives. That was what was so meaningful for it. And then this last year, 2021, eventually the formal racing started again. And again, there were some people who just didn't feel comfortable going out, but most people did. And we started racing. We had actual formal races. And over the course of the season, we won the Mass Bay Championship in our racing class. And it was an enormous accomplishment for the Chariot team.
Wow. I mean, what's so like analogous to all of this, right? Is, sailing is your passion. My passion is music and drums and all of this. Right. But either way, no matter how you look at it, both of us are looking through the lens of our passions in the world of business. Right. And it's really, I think that's why it's so important, no matter what your passion is, no matter what your interest is, to continue to pursue those, to continue to make sure that those thrive, because it only gives you more perspective and, bringing people together in a team, setting, the way you're thinking about leadership. That's why I specifically asked you about sailing and how it's all related, and writing books and boards. And because to me, as I talk to you, many times we've talked before, it just strikes me as like, while we're very different and, we have different passions, like we're kind of looking at things through similar lens in a weird way.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah, no, I think if you are, and maybe this is just how you and I think about it, but the people who live very narrow lives, and they don't, in my mind, they're not experiencing the richness that they could. But also, for myself, I'm learning lessons from sailing that are directly applicable to lots of other things I do in my life. And not because sailing, therefore, that's unique about learning lessons. It's not that at all. It's if I had to learn how to become very disciplined and good as a piano player, it would be very similar. I would be learning myself what do I have to do to be a really good at something for myself. And I suspect that's what you get out of your music, that learning something, how to do something really well, translates into other parts of your life.
It does. It's so interesting. There's a real discipline that's associated with becoming, any level of mastery of anything, right? If you're going to get to a certain level of proficiency, you have to really put in that practice and all of that
Right.
stuff. However, for me, the interesting thing is when I go to sit down behind a set of drums, so I see the world through that lens, right? So when I sit down, I imagine, that I'm on stage, right? I've got to have the right rhythm. I've got to have the right basis for everybody. It's got to feel good. I got to have a good feel. Then I got to look around and I got to understand the harmony and the melody and how it all intersects so that the entire, group can sound good. But guess what? The most important person is out there. That's the audience. And, playing to the audience and not playing for yourself, which many musicians do, right? And then you take that into the world of business. Now think about it. It's totally analogous, right? So I'm
Right.
sitting there. If I don't have the right rhythm and the right cadence of my meetings, of my day, of whatever, it falls apart, right? I don't get enough rest. I come in late, whatever it is, it falls apart. If you don't have the right synergy between the people in the group in that meeting on that board, it doesn't work. If we're playing for ourselves, meaning, oh, here we are thinking we're the best, and like the audience, meaning the customer, doesn't like what we're selling or the message or the brand or whatever, it doesn't work. So this is, to me, it's all kind of the same thing, and I think, for people to really be great at what they do, whatever it is, they've got to, look around, the world, right, a little bit too. It can't just
Right.
be about that, transactional thinking alone. I mean, that's
Right.
important. Don't get me wrong, but it's got to be a holistic person. That's what I've loved about the conversations I've had with you. You think about things in a 360-degree way, which is refreshing, especially as a
Well,
board member.
I don't know that I necessarily have any particular uniqueness in any of this, but it's certainly true that what you're saying about the audience absolutely applies to business because, that's the question you in dealing with younger companies who say, oh, wow, I have some really great, technology or little widget or whatever. And I say, okay, I mean, it's not I say, but what they need to ask themselves, is there an audience? Is there an audience that's going to applaud? Is there an audience that says, okay, I really like that enough that I'm going to stop doing this and buying that, and I'm going to buy what you have. I'm going to stop asking this person to help me and change to what asking you to help me. That audience is your customer. And so you have to find out, okay, Mr. Entrepreneur who says you want to found a company or grow your company, is there a paying customer for your product as you imagine it? And is there a big enough one so that if I, as an investor, who often says how this gets asked, that I'm going to put money in and take the chance that I can make some money out of this? Because in the truth, the investor wants, he cheers for you, but what he really wants is he or she, what they really want to do is they want to make some money on there, and that's worth the risk they're taking.
Return on investment. That's it.
And
Yeah,
it's an
exactly.
audience. Is there an audience there for you're playing your drums or my next widget or whatever it is?
Right. No, exactly right. And it's so interesting too, let's talk about investors for a minute, right? Because, many of the people listening to this, right, are wondering, they might be a young aspiring, they don't have to be young, they could be old, it doesn't matter, but they're aspiring to be that entrepreneur that has that next big thing, right?
Right.
And as they're sitting there listening to this, and boards and all that sounds great. But one of the big questions that most people are asking is, hey, how do I find investors? How do I connect with investors? Rick, as someone who has played in this world for a long time, like what kind of recommendations do you have for someone that might be listening, that might be looking for investors or networking with investors or even just, engaging with investors?
Okay. I don't want to make this trite, but I'm going to make a trite statement. And that
Please.
is, money is almost never the problem. The problem is whether you have a good idea and a good product and a good story. Now, it's true that we go through cycles, and sometimes there's money gushing all over the place, and other times there's no money because everybody's afraid and hiding their cash under their mattress. I mean, yes, that is absolutely true. But it's like finding a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You just have to go and talk to a lot of people and find the one that is a match for you. And I will also say, I'm not answering your question, but I'm actually saying what's even more important than answering your question. And then that is that when you're taking money from an investor, it's not just the money. You are in effect getting married to that person or institution who's your investor. You're forming a long-term relationship. So you better be damn sure that you want to be married to that investor, that particular investor. That relationship in many respects is more important than the money for a whole lot of reasons we could come back to. So what I'm saying is, it's really not the money that's hard to find. It's the good idea, compelling idea, the great opportunity that you are finding, that opportunity you can present, that's actually more difficult to find than the money is. Assuming for a second that that do have a really compelling idea, then you've got to put a compelling story together. What's the problem you're solving? What is your solution to the problem? What evidence is there that that the solution you have is something you can actually make a profit out of providing in a competitive environment? And anyway, you got to put all of that together. And then once you've done that, then ask yourself, okay, what is I'm giving you maybe a longer answer you really want here, but what is my plan for the company? So if you're forming a company that is, you're planning to own it for the long term, essentially a family company in some respects, no investor is going to put money into that. I mean, you have to get because the investor only gets their money out if you're going to sell the company or go public or something like that. So you have to match what your financial plans are with the goals of investors. The investor says, okay, I'll put my money up for, 2, 3, maybe even 5, 7 years, maybe even 10 years in some case, but I'm only going to do that if this is going to be wildly successful. And there's a way that at the end of all this, I can make a substantial profit. And in other cases, it may be that, you really are looking for, try to find all the money you can from grants or other local funding, get funding from your suppliers, the delayed payments on whatever you're buying from them, get advanced payments from your customers. There are all sorts of ways you can get money that are not just asking somebody to write you a check. I mean, yes, that is part of it. But then the big deal is, okay, we got money. You just got to have to talk to a lot of people. Let people know really what your story is, what you're trying to do, what your vision for the company is, what kind of investors you're looking for, and then just talk to every single person you possibly can. There really isn't any simple way of doing it. It just shoe leather work, if that's the right phrase.
That's a great
going out and
phrase.
talking to people. And Greg, you've done it, so I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right though, Rick. I mean, I was working with a client just recently. We were talking and we were like, okay, we're making the deck, and we've got the deck. And it was like, when we're tweaking every last little word. But you know what? After a point, it was like, let's get out there and talk, because you know what the reality is, whatever we're thinking in our little bubble and the word and versus the or whatever it is not going to make a difference at all. What's going to make a difference is the storyline, is the big idea, is the product, is the
Right.
fit, is the TAM, all those things, right? So getting out there. I think you're right, is getting out there and actually talking to people, and not being a robot, right? Actually building relationships with people. I think that's key. I think you're right, Rick. You
Right.
know?
Right.
So okay, so now let's change the topic once again.
Uh-oh.
How do you stay productive? How do you, structure your time and just stay productive as a professional?
What I found was that I actually had to change a lot of things in my life to get how I was living my my schedule, et cetera, in order to get my book written. And in many respects, it's similar to what somebody who's starting a company would probably have to do. I not probably would have to do. So I found that I had to be very careful about what my sleep schedule was, because I got more done between, say, 7 or 7:30 in the morning and noon or 1 o'clock. And then after that, it was sort of irrelevant what happened the rest of the day. So it's not that I was doing this. I wasn't writing my book every day. That's not true. But what I found was that I had to be extremely careful about time commitments in that 7:30 to noon or 1 o'clock time frame. So I put all my meetings off to the afternoon, everyone I could do, all my phone calls I could put off the afternoon, I put them all off in the afternoon to make sure I had time in that morning, because that's the productive time of the day for me. I made sure whenever I could, I was going to get in bed at the same time every night. That sounds trivial, like you're a kid, like you're a 3-year-old kid. But the truth is, if you're trying to get something important done, you have to think about your life like that. I tried to be careful about what I was eating. I mean, you're asking about how I get my work done, but that was part of it, is managing my sleep, what I was eating, drinking, all of that sort of stuff, to make sure that my most productive hours were available to do the book and other things that I was doing. And I was on a couple of boards during all of this, and so obviously I was doing work for that and also writing some other articles and that sort of thing. So I had to significantly change how I was managing my own time and my own physical body as a person to maximize my effort. And we also then shut down with all personal meetings. So, okay, well, how do we communicate with each other? I communicated through my writing. Zoom. I don't know if I ever even heard of Zoom before COVID. And I have been, as you probably know, your listeners may not know, but I was president of the Harvard Business School Alumni Association. So before COVID, we were doing like 30 programs a year, all in person. So fortunately, I'm no longer president, because in many ways, an important but thankless job. As
a lot of work, I'm sure.
Any president of volunteer organization would say. But what I found I got my kicks out of was, is organizing some larger programs, and we're all doing it virtual. So I, for HBSAB and for NEAN and some of the other organizations, I get a whole lot of kicks out of organizing some major speakers, major programs that we then can make available to a much larger national, in some cases international audience through Zoom, we never were doing before COVID. So I had Jeremy Siegel, who was on the faculty at Wharton in Philadelphia, on a program about his outlook for the stock market. This is about a year ago. And we had 700 people on that Zoom call. And it was fascinating. He was a terrific panelist, person, speaker. He's on television all the time, and it gave him exposure to an audience that he otherwise would not have had. I'm putting together a program right now on cryptocurrency, and what the heck is that anyway, and why is it important, and where's the future of it going? And so at some point in the next 3 months, we'll be doing a program on that, similar to what you're doing. And, it's just been a kick for me to have this channel of communication, which we never had before. And indeed, it's not getting together in person. You're not shaking hands and giving your old friends hugs and all that sort of stuff. but it is a way of making connections that, we just were not making before. And, that's the world we live in today.
It's so true, Rick. It's so true. So, all right, I have one more question for you, which is if you were talking to any of our listeners right now, and somebody's sitting out there, because look, it hasn't been an easy time, right? We talk about the whole COVID time. It has not been an easy time. There are a lot of people out there that are struggling and figuring out what to do. What one piece of advice would you give to anybody that's listening right now that's either struggling or trying to, get up off the mat or reinvent themselves, whatever it might be? Is there one piece of advice you might give them today?
Well, I think back to the story I told you about our sailing last year. That is exactly what all of us were facing. It's like, what am I going to do with my own life at this point? And, sailing wasn't all of our lives. I mean, this is something you're doing, on a Saturday or a Sunday, once or twice a month over the course of the summer. But it was saying, there is something I can do. I can get out of my house or my apartment. I can get on a sailboat with other people that I really love and respect and want to be with, and just go do something that's fun. It's fun, important. It's not important in the big world, but it's giving me something to do. That's now, not everybody has the opportunity to go sailing, but I would say, what we've got to do is just walk out the door. Just get up off the couch or get up away from your goddamn computer and screen and just walk out the door. I ride a bike. So yesterday I did like an hour and a quarter bike ride. I'm going to try to do one at the end of the day today. For me, that's what I do. I walk out the door and I get on my bike and I just go for a bike ride. Now you say, well, what is that going to do? That's not getting me a paycheck. No, but it's going to get your mind in the frame that, in fact, you have some control over your life. And then you come back and you say, well, okay, I'm not on my bike, but what am I going to do? I do have some control. Let me go do something. I'm going to call up that guy, Rick Williams or Gregg, and get engaged, or my friend that we've been bouncing ideas off. We're going to make something happen. Get up, walk out the door, and just get started and do anything. Do something other than just sit around and say it's a really tough time for all of us. It is. But we have control. I'm going to go back to my book. We control the future by the decisions we make today.
There it is.
The decision I would suggest that you make is stand up, walk out the door, do something, and then say, what am I going to do to create the tomorrow that I want, the next week that I want, the next year that I want? That's how you'll create the future for yourself.
Wow, that is super powerful, Rick. So where can people find this book? Where can they find you online? Where can they learn more about you? Give us a shameless plug. Let's go.
If you go to my website, I have a website. The website is williamsadvisorypartners.com. So my website, it's my board of directors and advisory website, williamsadvisorypartners.com. The book actually has its own website, createthefuture.solutions, and my sailboat website is Chariot. It's CHARIAD, chariot.com. And I look forward to hearing from anybody who wants to get engaged with me.
I love it. Rick, I got to tell you, man, it's always a pleasure hanging with you, but today was especially interesting. I hope it's super helpful to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us, Rick. For anybody that's listening, this is Success at Scale with Triple G Ventures. We love having you guys, and hope to keep bringing you some great stuff. For anybody that's listening, please like, share, subscribe, all that social media stuff that, it's cool. I'm trying to be hip, but, it doesn't really work. But, what are you going to do? Anyways, thanks for listening. And until next time, we'll see you real soon. Stay safe and peace.